You're listening to the Teach Better Talk podcast featuring expert educators eager to share progressive tactics to reach more students. Teach Better Talk is created by teachers and fueled by passion. Let's get started.
Hey everyone, welcome to episode 59 of Teach Better Talk. I'm Ray Heward, and as always, I am with who am I with? I just don't remember my co-host's name. Is that okay?
This is the worst ever.
Well, this is the worst ever because I was trying to think of a word to describe you, and I decided I'm sick of coming up with words. I just need to steal from other people's ideas.
There are no words. Some things are just not describable.
You are not describable. We described you a few episodes ago as precious, but that just seemed a little, creepy. And witty was what I thought of because we have been laughing all night, but we used that a few weeks ago.
You used witty not too long ago, yeah.
You've been very productive today. Can we talk about how you've, accomplished a lot in your life today? Should we focus on that?
We've never used productive before?
Well, I'm sure we have. Let's be honest.
Yeah, that's true. There's only so many words.
Well, I'm excited to say, listeners, that I'm with the incredibly productive Jeff Gargett.
Incredibly productive. This is a horrible start to podcast. I hope you're still listening. If you are, I assure you, this is actually a really, really cool podcast episode. But before we get into that, Ray, I want to touch really quick and get your thoughts on something.
What would you like my thoughts on, my incredibly productive friend?
So we released this new course recently over at teachbetteracademy.com. It's called Master in Management through Student-Centered Practice. Chad Ostrowski leads the course. It's an awesome breakdown of strategies that you can, easy to implement strategies that you can use to help create a student-centered environment to help with your management. And I just kind of wanted to, you wrote a really cool post that kind of goes along with that course. And the post, do you remember what I'm talking? You know what I'm talking about? It's called Change Your Grading Practices, Change Student Behavior.
Yeah, it goes perfectly with Chad's new course. We were trying to not only share out that course, but then have little snippets in our blogs. And so absolutely I know what you're talking about.
Well, all right then. So my question is changing the grading practices the first thing I should focus on? Is it the most important thing, or is it just one of a bunch of things that I should do in order to really change that behavior and have a better control over the management of my classroom?
Something valuable about classroom management is that you actually can come at it from 1,000 different points, right? So when we look at Chad's course and having him provide strategies to anyone interested in taking that course, the strategies are so flexible. I mean, you might use one strategy now and then go back a few days later and pull a different strategy for a different type of student. And so when it comes to grading, I kind of see that as a very similar mentality. It is an incredible tool that I encourage anybody to dabble with because it really is a way to connect more deeply with your students when you're able to change your grading practices to focus more on feedback and focus more on supporting your student from wherever they're at, and get them what they need. I think that mentality is incredibly valuable. And so for a teacher that's looking to find new strategies in terms of classroom management, I would always challenge them, whether it be first or last, to be considering how their assessment, how their grading, how their feedback is impacting then every other component of their classroom, whether it be their classroom culture or their relationship building or anything in between.
I love it. I'm glad I asked that question. So that's what I was looking for right there. So let's do something fun. You want to do something fun? Can we do something cool?
I'm always in for something cool.
So what do you think? So that's our newest course as of right now. We have a whole bunch more in the works right now. What if we gave anyone who's listening 50% off?
Oh my gosh, I'm totally.
Can I do that? Right? I'm not even going to make them listen to they should definitely listen to this whole episode because it's super awesome with Jason. But if they go to teachbetteracademy.com, go to the new Master Management course, 50% off. I'm going to make it really easy. Teach Better Talk, all one word. Boom, 50% off. Is that okay? Am I allowed to do that? Am I okay to do that? Am I good with that? Is that cool?
You should know that I don't know if you're allowed to do that, but I'm totally in.
That's awesome. So, speaking of being in, let's dive in. That's so cheesy. Let's dive into this episode because this was a
It
really
was
cool
so
episode.
cheesy, this episode. My goodness.
This was a really cool episode though because Jason Reagin is a overseas teacher, so he's been teaching for 21 years, a little over 21 years, so a lot of experience. But 14 of those years, he's been overseas in other countries, which is really cool. That's I think, the first person we've had on this show that is someone who has the experience in teaching overseas. And I think it was really cool. You could tell that it's given him a different perspective on I think just the world and life and the way he approaches things. But some really really cool stuff. I love we were able to dive into his head a little bit of how do you do that? Like, how did that get started? How did he go from being in Atlanta, Georgia, to ended up in South Korea and a couple countries in between? And that sort of his sort of journey there and becoming what he calls, a developer of global citizens and his students. I thought was really cool. It was a really neat thing. And he dives into like, hey, here's how you get started. Here's what to look for and stuff, which I think was really cool. I don't know if that excited you as much as it did me, but I thought it was awesome.
Oh, absolutely. He was incredible to talk to, not only because of his background education, obviously his travel, but the risks and this different lens he's approaching education with. I loved it. I actually asked him a question and he responded, well, I think this is going to be pretty boring for some of your listeners. And it was the coolest answer I think we've heard on the show.
Super cool. And we actually ended up like talking about it for a while afterwards. I love also he shared his failure. I mean, I always love the failure stories, but I really like his failure story because he actually shares a personal failure that ended up turning into a professional lesson for him. And I thought that was a really cool spin on that question that we asked. And he does. He goes into the question you asked when he said, oh, it might be boring, like, what he talks about and what they're doing a lot with over there is really, really cool. I also love the fact that he was literally, it's the evening over here for us, and it was like 10 minutes before the first bell rings over in his school, and he was tucked away in a podcast booth working with us. So huge thanks to Jason Reagin for that. He is phenomenal. You're going to love this episode.
It is awesome. We might be a mess, but this episode is not. So let's get started.
All right, so we are talking with Jason Reagin, and he's coming to us from South Korea. Jason, it's so awesome. I know it's early in the morning there. It's getting in the evening here in Ohio and in Illinois where Ray is. But we're super excited that you were able to make some time with us and hang out with us and have some fun with us, man. How are you feeling right now?
I'm great, man. Thanks, Jeff and Ray. I appreciate you taking time to speak with me, and it's really exciting to be talking with you guys.
Well, Jason, we want to make sure we talk about you for a minute because while Jeff did give you a little bit of an introduction, I know there is so much more that we have in store to learn about you throughout this episode. But first off, how do you describe yourself when somebody asks you what you do?
Well, that answer has changed lots over the years. Over 20 years of teaching, that answer has been different every year. I would say at the moment it's developing students to be global citizens. I feel like that the world has really become very small with social media, especially. We can have friends from all over the world. And so just, teenagers are teenagers wherever you live in the world. And so I think developing global citizens is probably my number one goal when I teach, just thinking about how to, empathy, creating empathy, understanding tolerance. Those are things that just educating the whole student, not necessarily just in my own subject, but just having those relationships with students so that they can see that everybody has lots of similarities, even though they can all be different. And I think that's probably what I see myself as a person who's helping to develop global citizens.
Really cool. And you've done that all over the place.
Yeah.
I know you said you've been doing, I think 14 of your 21 years, you've been somewhere else other than the United States. Where are you from originally?
Yeah. I'm from Atlanta originally.
Okay.
Yeah.
So can you just share with us for a minute, like where all you've been? Because I know you've been a few different places.
So it's a crazy story, but I was in Atlanta for the first year I taught, and it was in an urban high school. And while I enjoyed the experience, I just didn't feel that was going to fulfill me over the long haul through retirement. And so after a year, an opportunity came up to move to China to teach English. So in 1999, I packed up and moved to Beijing, China, where there were still more bikes than there were cars. And so that really kind of gave me the travel bug. And I taught in a university there teaching English, which was a a big push there by the government at the time. And so I did a year there and then moved back home for a couple years. And then another opportunity came to move back to China. And so while I was in China the first time, I realized, well, international schools were the way to go because I could work with kids that maybe had similar backgrounds to me, but were in a different setting. And so I lived in China for a long time where I met my wife, who's also from China. And then after a while, we moved back home, spent some time in the States again. She's also a teacher. And then we moved to Bermuda. So we did a year in Bermuda, then went back to China after a while because our kids needed to learn Chinese as well. And then we currently are in South Korea.
Hey everyone, we're going to get right back to the episode, but I did want to remind you that if you haven't yet submitted a proposal for the Teach Better Conference this November 8th and 9th, you have to go do it. The proposals are closing at the end of the month, and I want to make sure that you get your voice heard. You are doing incredible things in your classroom, and we would love to have you as a presenter at Teach Better Conference this November 8th and 9th. Head over to teachbetterconference.com and share your ideas. All right, let's get back to the episode.
Wow, like that's awesome. Like that you're over there and you get exploring that and doing that. So it's really cool that you met your wife over there as well. That she's been able to come to the States. You're back there. It's really, really cool. So a lot. I mean, 21 years. That's a lot of experience. Multiple countries and different things.
Right.
I mean, they're like. Let's talk about. Because I know you got them. Because I mean, your experience, you had to, right? Let's talk about failure for a second. So, can you take us to a time that you had a failure? Kind of share with us what happened. Why was it a failure to you? And then how did you overcome that? And what did you take away from it?
Well, my failure is a little different probably than most of the folks that have been on your podcast. For me, it was a personal failure that turned into a professional understanding. And so, as I mentioned, my wife is Chinese, and we met when I was living in China in 2002. And I didn't speak very much Chinese. Obviously, I didn't have a lot of exposure to that growing up. And so I tried to study. It's a very difficult language with 4 tones and all these different things. And so the thing was, once I met my wife, who happened to be my Chinese tutor at the time, I had a different motivation to learn Chinese. And so now I speak enough Chinese to get in trouble. And then I just call her to help me out. But, I would love to. We speak Chinese at home. But the failure was that every time I tried, I always did it wrong because the tones were different. So saying something that I thought I was saying correctly was actually incorrect because of the tone that I used and those sorts of things. And what I discovered through that was that the majority of my students are second language English speakers, and it just gave me a level of sympathy and empathy for them that I probably wouldn't have had I not been a second language learner myself. And so I just, that was my biggest failure in a way, was that I still haven't gotten to the level of Chinese I would like to speak, because I know a lot of friends who speak very good Chinese, but I would like to speak better. But in the end, it's about time, isn't it? And how much time you can devote to something.
Very cool. I love that. I love that as a personal story. I appreciate you sharing that with us. So now let's flip that around. Let's talk about a successful moment you've had. This can be something big or small, but tell us what happened. Why was it a success for you? And then what'd you take away from that?
Sure. Yeah. So I teach design, which is what would be industrial arts or tech ed or STEM at home in the States. And so one of the things when I moved to my new school that I immediately noticed was an issue was that we didn't have any way of archiving or recording our sports program. And the reason that was important was a lot of the schools have to travel here from long distances to compete with us. And so I was approached about running our live stream for all of our varsity sports, which I didn't know anything about at the time. And so having done that, I assembled a team of students to help me, and we were able to set up a live stream. And now we have a pretty professional looking stream, I think. And we've done over 50 or 60 events in the last 12 months. So I really feel that was been a success, and the students have really enjoyed having that as a process that they've gone through and feeling instant success. So that was probably the most recent success that I've had that I've been really proud of.
Jason, something I really enjoy about learning about you has just been your commitment, your excitement to like take risks, whether it be risks through traveling or risks for your students. I mean, that's amazing.
Mm. Yeah, it's something that I didn't grow up taking lots of risks, so it was definitely out of my comfort zone. But now it's something that's part of my DNA, and so even my own children, for them, they've been to, I don't know, a dozen countries at this point, either by vacation or just by living there. And so I'm just happy that they're going to be risk takers by nature, you know. And so, but thank you, I appreciate that. That helps validate a lot of things, Ray.
Well, no, it's the truth. I mean, I think, Jeff, I don't know if you agree, but I think the biggest hurdle that we struggle with when doing professional development with teachers is just simply to get over the fear of taking a risk.
Yeah, absolutely.
Change is really hard. It's not easy.
Absolutely, especially when you're working with the teacher on doing something that's going to transform their classroom. I mean, I always think, when I think risk, I think the grid method, Jeff. I'm such a loser that I think that way. Because it really is a huge change in the classroom. You're completely, as an educator, stepping out of your comfort zone, but it's aligned with everything you know that you wish you could do with your students. And so when I'm thinking about risks that you've taken, I know change is hard, but I just love hearing from passionate educators that have made it work. And that kind of leads into my next question, which was, what's exciting you? And I'm sure there's a lot of things that excites you about education and all that you're doing, but I assume that what is exciting you is whatever you're doing, I'm sure has some sort of risk. So I guess I'm excited for the next story, because I always feel like story after story, there's something new that you're dabbling with that takes some sort of grit. So I really appreciate that.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. Ironically, the thing I'm excited about could probably be boring to a lot of people, but I've just seen the rise of unmanned aircraft in schools. So drones, we've been doing a lot with drones at the school, and I'm finding so many different uses for it in education. Immediately, some of the things we've done was working with the PE teachers and hovering over their outside classroom on the field and taking still photos and letting them use that as a teaching tool to show formations and invasion games or whatever. But also we went through and we took pictures, aerial photos of the entire school, and we made like an orienteering or a mapping activity with our social studies teachers. And so I'm just really excited about the opportunities that come with that. So I've now purchased some small drones that students can actually do the programming for on their iPad. And so they're able to do flips and shoot little rubber balls and have little grabbers, and they'll pick up Post-it notes and things like that. So I'm just excited about the use of that tool. I know that it's been kind of getting some bad rap lately with all the different people not being responsible with their droning and going into airspaces and things that they shouldn't be in. But I find that they're something the students are excited about. Even the parents are excited about the students learning about them. So, and it falls into the category of things I teach anyway. But the droning that we're doing and the programming, we have second and third graders actually programming these drones. So I'm pretty excited about where the future is going with those.
Jason, in what world is playing with a drone at school not cool?
Exactly.
I was thinking the same thing.
Like, hold on. Actually, this is a really boring answer. Let me talk to you about drones and how
it's all over the place. I have to keep myself interested in things, right?
I just think I love that. I think that there's such a purposeful use for that. But even just a teacher listening who's like, man, I don't have access to drones. The idea that you're taking a tech tool and purposefully integrating it into multiple different areas of the school alone is a valuable component.
Right.
Well, and I don't know if you're aware or not, Jason, but like the United States Air Force has invested millions of dollars into education initiatives that are connected to drone technology right now.
Yeah,
they're pushing really hard for that. I mean, that's going to be such a massive thing. Like the skills that those kids are learning.
Absolutely.
Just if you take away and you only focus on just the skill of learning how to drive, of how to utilize the drone, and thinking of different ways how you're showing them, hey, look how we can use this in education.
Absolutely.
Think of all the other ways you can use it and all the other jobs and everything else you do. Like That's awesome. I actually have. I'm gonna give a shout out to my neighbor, uh, Joe, who actually is a drone pilot. But he actually got his. He's got all of his license and stuff. His company paid for it. He's a marketing guy, and he had this
Right.
idea a few years back. They have this. They're like a distributor in this massive warehouse that like sets records or whatever up in Cleveland, and he had this idea of like a promotional commercial to get more clients that he was going to fly through and just show off this awesome, amazing warehouse they have. And now they pay him. He goes out to all
Yep.
the
He
Cleveland
does.
events
Yep.
and flies drones around, and they use it
That's
as
right.
content. It's like this
Yep.
awesome thing. And now he's got all kinds of, he's flying around the house all the time and stuff. But like, there's so many uses in it that we haven't even thought of that those kids are going to have the skills to do. That's really, really cool. I
Yeah,
love it.
I actually have some students at my previous school who were seniors that started their own production company because
Okay.
that school was in China and they got the only license that that city allowed for drone pilots to do
Mm,
filming anywhere. It was unrestricted access to any part of the
wow.
city, and they're making all the production videos and all the things for this particular city, which is a pretty famous city in China. And he was 16 when he did it, so it's pretty unbelievable if a student has that spatial awareness because flying a large drone is it does require a lot of practice and a lot of time, and
Mm-hmm.
you're having to fly something by looking at the screen, you know, and so
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that skill is something that's only going to increase in a lot of job markets.
Sure.
You know, if it's whether it's robotics or whatever, or even like surgery with all these different
Mm-hmm.
robotic surgery type things. So
Yeah.
I do think the skills are definitely something that students will need, whether they're actually doing it as a hobby or as a profession.
Jason, you have already provided so much value. I love this conversation. I kind of want to flip this around and talk about our new teachers, our progressive educators who might either be new to the field or maybe they're just new dabbling with something that they are taking a little bit of risk on. But I would love to know what advice you'd love to give those teachers.
You know, I think the thing that I noticed throughout my entire teaching career was the number of people who left the career within the first year or two. And so I think my biggest piece of advice would just to be hang in there. If you can make it over the 3-year hump, I think that you'll be really happy that you did, because education's given me so much as a as a professional, but also personally. And you know, it's okay to make a change. You know, I took a risk and made a change. I think you spoke about that earlier, Ray. That you know, I made a huge change. I'm not saying everyone has to move overseas, but it is an option, and you can actually save a lot more money, but also there's a lot more opportunities and challenge in that. And so I would say just hang in there. You just push through, kind of learn as much as you can along the way. But the biggest thing is just making it through that 3-year hump. I find is probably the best advice I can give anybody is just to not, you know, and sometimes it's not for everybody, but in most cases, you know, give it those 3 years because you really can't know in just a year of doing something. You need to give it some time to experience the ups and downs.
I love it. That's great advice. I want to touch on a piece of it. I want to talk. So it's fairly pretty unique, or at least I mean
Mm.
you're the first we've had on here to have someone who's an overseas teacher. So like
Yeah.
I want to jump on this.
Okay.
So Jason,
Okay.
let's pretend that I'm an educator that's thinking that's listening
Yep.
right now, going, man, that sounds really cool. I want to do
Yeah.
that. How do I do it? Like how do I even get
Absolutely.
started? Kind of a two part. One is
Mm.
how do I get started in being an
Sure.
overseas educator, and then the second part is what are like the top one, two, three things that I should be
Yeah.
aware of, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Those sort of like
Absolutely.
go to like, hey, watch out for this and make
Right.
sure that type of thing. Can you give us a little bit on that?
Yeah, I would say absolutely. That's a great question, Jeff. And actually, I have a lot of people ask me that. There is a number. There are a number of recruitment companies who set up job fairs you can go to every year to find, and the schools actually attend them. So you'll have the principal or the vice principal or the different curriculum coordinators there, so you can ask them firsthand questions. I would say being open to where you're going to go. If you just say I want to work in Italy, it's going to be really hard to do that. But if you say, I'm open to Asia, for example, there will be lots of opportunities for you. Um, I think the number one thing to look out for is if a company asks you to come in to the country on a tourist tourist visa and that they'll switch it when you get there. That's usually a telltale sign that they maybe aren't a legit company or a legit school. But that's probably the main one. And if someone's maybe new in the teaching career, it's okay to take a year or two teaching English somewhere at one of these smaller academies or schools where they'll pay your housing and they'll fly you there and they'll pay for you there, while you're there. It gives you a good opportunity to experience what it's like to do that. And sometimes you can just do 6 months or even just the summer. So there's opportunities to do that. But there's there's 3 or 4 categories of international schools. You've got your British schools. So if you're familiar with British curriculum, those are ones you can go to. There's also American schools. So there's a lot of American schools around. And then there's international baccalaureate schools, so IB schools, which is what I've spent my career in. And then there's the Department of Defense schools. And so those are a little bit more difficult to navigate. I don't know as much about how you get a job with one of those other than going to their website. But for those first 3 I mentioned, you can use various recruitment services. But quite frankly, if you just see a place you want to go and you see a school that you like, they have information on their website on how to look for a job there. So if you're really interested in working in Vietnam, you can go to the website of the school, and they often have a way to tell you how to get in touch with them.
Very cool. That is, I mean, that's awesome information. I really appreciate
Yeah.
you giving this detail there. Very, very valuable there. So really loving it. So let's have some fun now. We're going to do the
Okay.
next 6 questions. Your goal is to answer each one in 15 seconds or less. You ready?
Okay, sure.
What is one ed tech tool you cannot live without?
Synth. It's gosynth.com. It allows you to create micro podcast snippets. And what's nice is the first 60 seconds, it creates a transcript of what you said. So students can read and hear what you're saying.
What is give us a book that you're reading right now?
It's called Leadership Really Matters by Maxine Driscoll. It's about just various forms of leadership, especially in international schools.
Awesome. And who do we need to follow on Twitter right now?
My boy Craig Kemp. He's out of Singapore, but he's a New Zealand guy. He's at Mr. Kemp NZ, and he's an ed tech guru, so he's a great one to follow.
What's the best YouTube channel for educators?
My friend Sergio out of Thailand. It's called Flipped Classroom Tutorials, and it's got some really great snippets on how to do different things with Google Drawings and different Google tools. And he makes really high quality videos, so it's definitely one that I would recommend to anybody.
Great, and give us a daily, weekly, or monthly routine every teacher should get into.
I make a habit of checking in with all of my students one-on-one at least once a month, even if it's just to ask how their month's been going. It's just I find that building those relationships is already hard enough when they're in a group. So sitting down one-on-one, you never know what a positive impact you're going to have on students.
I love that. That's a great one. So, and then finally, let's wrap it up with the best piece of advice you've ever received.
Well, I know it's a little cliche, but if you love your job, you never go to work. And so I've tried to live by that and impart that same wisdom to my students.
He did all right, Ray. I think he nailed it.
He did. And Jason, I have loved hearing your stories. I think you have so much value, not only in your experience, obviously traveling, but taking risks, and you're doing such innovative things with your students. And I want to make sure our listeners are able to connect with you because you're sharing a lot constantly about how your students are being impacted. And I just would love for our listeners to also gain that value. Would you mind sharing how they can connect with you?
Absolutely. Twitter is what I've been using most lately. And my Twitter handle is at DISKO. N, the number 4, NO. It's Disco Inferno. It's a little play on words. Sorry. And then my website is www.jasonreagin.ga. And then I have a YouTube channel. If you just search for the hashtag IB Design Guy, it'll come up.
Love it. And you know, you can find all the links and resources and everything we mentioned in this episode over at teachbetter.com, as well as all those links to important links for connecting with Jason and getting over to his website and his YouTube channel. We'll have all that over there in the show notes, so head over to teachbetter.com for all of that. Be sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss any of the upcoming episodes, and if you can give us a rating and review, we'd really appreciate that as well. Jason, it's really been a pleasure, man. I really appreciate you taking some time before you're heading into work right now. You're in work. You're actually at your school. And when
I
your
have
podcast
class in 10 minutes.
So you get class in 10 minutes. So we appreciate you finding some time to chat with us, man. We really do. This was an awesome episode. Some really, really cool stuff. So just thank you. We appreciate you.
I really appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
All right. Until next time, let's get out there and let's teach better.